Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa, and we are freezing. And I say this every show lately that I get onto, but my word, it's chilly here. It was snowing in Johannesburg yesterday. Not that I live in Johannesburg, but wow. And that's quite unusual, although it has happened a little bit in the past. But wow, it's quite crazy. And welcome to Alice Pirola again, our
Hello.
um, Tuesday guest. Welcome. But before we get chatting to Alice, I want to just again say thank you to our sponsor for today's show, who is a spooky tool, and they are the home rife machines. They are the creators of these incredible little home rife machines. And just a little bit later, maybe about halfway through the show, we're just going to go check out an ad of theirs where I haven't even actually seen it yet. Morné has. Ingrid, who is a breast cancer survivor,
Mm.
and basically, after using Spooky 2 from 2017, the cancer cells have shrunken completely. And then her sister, who was actually dying of Candida, started using Spooky 2 and then was completely cured. I really enjoy the frequency medicine, I have to say. I think one has to be aware as well, definitely. But I must say, my experience with Spooky 2 is amazing. They're wonderful to deal with, and they've got an array of home rife machines. So you're welcome to check out their website and get a discount, 5% discount on your purchase. And you can use my name, Chantelle, as your coupon code, and that ensures you get a 5% discount. So if you're looking for something alternative, I'll highly recommend this. Cool. So thank you, Spooky too. I'm going to tell you, my mother loves her little thing. It was mine, but now it's
I
hers.
was going to just ask you that. I thought you had said your mom was using it.
Yeah. She's just, I mean, thank goodness I don't need it.
Mm.
But, she really enjoys just, if she has anything, a gammy finger or anything, she just pops it on and it's fine. It's
That's
lovely.
tremendous. That's great.
Yeah. Anyway, Alice, nice to have you back again. Really good to have
Thank
you back again.
you.
And I'm looking forward to our discussion today because we're looking at organized religion that has no place for the mentally ill.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting topic for discussion because I'm going to agree with that as well. But
Mhm.
I'd love to hear what you have to say. So welcome back and over to you.
Over to me.
Over to
Well,
you.
my goodness. I want to make the connection that this has this really is not to sit here and throw S bombs at churches or anything like that.
Sure.
It's not to trash churches. It's not to say that all organized religion is bad. It's to give my personal testimony of how living with mental illness and certain things, depression, anxiety, whatever the case is, and how it was approached at the church and what happened in my journey. So this is my journey. This may not be your journey. I really don't want people to think I'm sour on churches. Our son-in-law is a preacher. He is a
Yeah.
minister, and our daughter is very much involved in the ministry with him. And so I just think that mental health issues is the big elephant in the room that's not talked about at organized religion churches. It's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. And it's very hard to find someone who has not dealt with some type of mental illness, either themselves or their family member. Perhaps, what was that? I don't know.
My cat just jumped off the counter, but thank you so much.
I thought
So,
your house was starting to fall in on you, Shanti.
okay.
Are we good?
We're good, honey. We're good. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Hello, Kat. So I just want to say, either you, your family member, anybody that you know, a friend, somebody in your life is going to touch your life with mental health issues. That
Oh,
would
yeah.
you agree that that's
Most
important?
definitely.
Yeah.
I think on varying scales, but most definitely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Most definitely. I think that that's going to happen. And I think it does happen. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, what I realize more and more as well, sorry, it might not be in your immediate family,
Mm-hmm.
but when you start talking to your aunties and uncles,
It comes out of the closet.
right? Or when you get your mum or your dad one night when they've had a glass of wine too many, then they start talking about the families. I found that often, and just also in my journey as a healer,
Mm-hmm.
when the minute people start talking and you start investigating,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll often find that there was someone along the way that had some type of mental condition, and it was very often, mostly not spoken about and
Mm-hmm.
dealt with as shame. And in those days, I mean, when I'm going back, like obviously I was born in the 60s, but also just remembering from things that were spoken about then. Um, I remember a man, one of the farmers. Now, farmers, you got to know, don't have mental health issues, right? Especially not if you're a Karoo farmer in South Africa.
You're
It
being
was just,
facetious, right?
totally, yes, I am
Okay.
being facetious. Said very tongue in cheek. Um, but I remember a story that he suddenly disappeared and then he
Mm.
came back again, and it was a big hush hush thing as to where he went to. And he came back, and I just remember as a little kid, he was very different. He was
Mm.
much more demure, whatever. It turned out years later, he went to a psychiatric ward because he couldn't deal with something, and he literally had shock therapy.
Oh
That was
no.
the way they dealt with it.
Oh no.
So it was considered a huge shame within the communities, you know. So it's like that. I think we were mentioning it even the last time, Alice. We were talking about this. It's really only been in the 60s
Mm-hmm.
that we've started dealing with mental slash emotional health,
Right.
because we cannot discard. I mean, we cannot have mental health unless we have emotional health.
Right.
And we can't be emotionally healthy or emotional imbalance and
Mm-hmm.
think we're going to be mentally balanced. The two work completely synchronistically, right?
It's true. It's true. Yeah. That is such a shame that he had to have the shock treatment, because that is um, so mind altering, so harmful, and
I think,
it can
yeah,
totally erase your memory. There's many things that can happen with that, but that's a whole nother topic.
I would actually
But
love for us to actually do interesting, but just yes, it is a show for another day. I get it, but because I think if we're looking again at those years where our parents were coming out of wars and stuff like that, poverty,
Mhm.
they had no emotional support, right? So
Oh,
I'm sure
correct.
many of them would have had that type of treatment if they couldn't deal with whatever was going on. That must have been a big thing in those years, right? So I would like to
Mhm.
understand the effect, the long term effect, and how that affected families. But yes, that is a story for another day, but it's a goodie.
I've done a whole blog on that,
Really?
and not just the mental, the shock treatments, but on the psychiatric wards, the way that things were back then. And I've delved a lot into that in my book, and I would be more than willing to do a show on that. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's
I
very
think that would be a
heartbreaking.
great one. Yeah, I think that's a great one because I think it gives us a lot of understanding because we can't discard the fact that our ancestors affected us. Their lives, their experiences most certainly flows through, right? That's why we have
Yeah,
the yeah.
definitely. And back then, they didn't know, so they locked away. And that's kind of what the church has done. The church doesn't know how to deal with mental health issues. And so when I started coming out with mine, I actually started my relationship with Christ. I started serving Christ when I was in my early 30s and started attending a denomination called Pentecostal, which is, the full blown speaking in tongues and, all the hoopla and everything else. And back then, that's just what I was brought into by a girlfriend of mine. And so it was all I ever knew. We had gone to every church under the sun with my father. If you know my backstory, I come from a trauma background, and my father was a choir director. He was a church organist, but he was also a homosexual and a pedophile. And he was, in fact, molesting the young boys in the choir and molesting my brother, myself. And so he was in the church and doing all these things. And they would just hush, hush and move us on to another church. They wouldn't say why he was being fired or why we were being moved on. But he would get caught. And eventually, even my mother didn't know. She swears to this day that she has no idea that he was doing these things. And so a lot of this is hidden in the church. Pedophilia, incest, mental health issues, it all boils into one big conglomeration of what gets shoved under the carpet. Because basically, my motto, my book, my whole platform is empathize, educate, advocate. Empathize, educate, advocate. Without the empathy for the mentally ill, you can't have a heart for wanting to help them. Without education, you don't know how to help them. Without advocation, you can't get the word out. You can't help others if you're not advocating on their behalf and helping them in that regard. So, one of the things that has a lot to do with how the church abuses the mentally ill, and I'm going to say they abuse them because they do. At least that was my experience that I had. Is number one, they tell you you're not praying enough, you're not reading your Bible enough, you're not regarding the scriptures, you're not fasting enough, and just they would come at me with all these things, and then they would say, you're not believing God because you need to go off of your medication. If you really believed God, you would not need medication. You would
Wow.
not have to be, going to a therapist.
Wow.
So
Isn't that so insane though? Because let's just look at that as it is. Because, this brings to mind for me that little saying that's, or that little story about the guy that's stuck on an island and he prays for God to come save him. And eventually, 6 boats later, that arrive and want to pick him up, he goes, no, 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 I've prayed.
right.
God's coming. God's coming. Meanwhile, God is sending the boats, right?
Yes.
So it's like understanding that medication to help you is a boat from God.
Mm-hmm.
A therapist that can help you understand your condition
Mm-hmm.
and help you to work through it and process it and heal from it, through it, and support you in whichever way is a gift from God. And especially if you resonate with whoever it is. And I do believe, God will send us options as well. There'll be an option of speaking to 2 or 3 people. And hey, maybe you like two, so you speak to two. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. It's like I fully get this whole cloak and dagger stuff with the church that they've been doing since forever. Everything is a shame. Everything is a shame. Everything must be done in quiet, and you don't talk about this. And the pastor got caught doing that, but oh, it's hush hush.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just hustle him along. What is that in the churches? What is that? Why do they do that?
It's holding up man above God and believing that man is not fallible, that man is infallible, and that he can be held up above God. There's a God complex that comes, I believe, with some preachers and teachers of the gospel. And as the congregation grows, as the church grows, it goes to their head. And our pastors that we sat under for many, many, many years, one church we were at for 10 years, it was literally a cult, in my opinion, in retrospect. And we had to pass everything through the pastor, everything we did, from our sex lives to if you wanted to move, to if you wanted to buy a new car, if you wanted to get further education, if you wanted to have a child. Everything had to be passed through the pastor. You had to sit with him and go through it. And if he didn't hear from God, then you weren't going to do it. So this was the pastor I was sitting under when I first came out with having these mental health issues. Now, we were in the church, we were deacons, and if you know anything about church political structure, and there is a literal political structure to many, many churches, we were deacons. My husband was on the trustee council managing the money. I was an altar worker, which meant that I worked with the people that received Christ, and I helped them with their first steps into the religion and into a relationship with God. And all of this, I want to say, I bought hook, line, and sinker. I was the perfect person coming out of a trauma background to fall into step with the political structure of the church, because it actually gave me boundaries. And I believe that our pastor was like God. I worshiped him. I really did. And I'm not saying my husband did. I'm not saying my daughter did, Nikki. I'm saying I did, because I was the one that came from that background that never had the parental upbringing or the right structured upbringing. And when I got into the church, it was like a breath of fresh air, like, wow, somebody's telling me what to do. Everything in my life can be controlled by this person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, Shanti. It was something that it was like a spell I was under.
So tell us a bit about how that played out for you.
Well, the first thing is they would do regular, like almost like an exorcism on me, and I'm laughing or I would cry, where the sisters of the church and the pastor would gather around me and speaking in tongues, and literally everyone in my face, demon come out of her, demon of depression come out of her, demon of anxiety come out of her, demon of BPD come out of her. And it was just like my pastor would hit on the back or the stomach, because they believe that the demons come out of the stomach area. And you literally, if you've been through anything like this, I don't know if it's from the hype, I don't know if it's from whatever, but you can literally throw up. you're shaking, you're getting sick, you're sweating, you're crying, you're screaming. It's hell. It's literal. It's abusive.
Is that
And
okay? Can I ask you? I would just like to ask you from someone who's experienced these types of exorcism. And honestly, I've only ever seen it in the movies. So forgive my ignorance if that's what it is, because I would like to know if from someone like you that has personally experienced that, when you say that you literally throwing up, um, and obviously you must be going through something, right, when they're doing this, because these are seriously powerful energies they're using, whether in the name of God or whether they're doing it in a dodgy way. We know now that the church can invert anything, right?
right.
I'm not saying they did or were. So I'm playing devil's advocate here, right? So how was that for you when you were sitting in that chair and you had your belly and your back being beaten with what? What were you being beaten with? Like,
Hands.
and okay, so it was more the physical trauma. It's actually a physical beating. And all these screaming and shouting in front of you that demons must release your body. I can imagine, and especially someone who's already traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's crazy.
Well, I'm going to say that I participated. I learned how to do quote unquote deliverance, and um, myself and my daughter participated in deliverance of others. Now, I never did the beating or anything like that, but I have laid hands on people. I have witnessed people. I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, but it was the same way every single time that I saw it. When somebody would throw up a demon, okay, it was a red ball, almost like jello and consistency, and it would actually roll on the floor and not break up. It would stay as a red ball, and we would take cloths and we would take it and dispose of it, and that would come out of the person. It was the same way
Wow.
every single time, Chantelle. It wasn't like people were
So
having
would that only occur if you actually, so are you saying that when you're doing exorcisms like this, right? And I do believe that these things do exist in people's bodies. So I'm not disputing that. What I'm asking is the more violent way, like the hitting and the slapping and the shouting, more effective than the more gentle approach? Where you
it's more theatrical. I think people, it gets into a mob mentality, is what it gets into. I've
is
been
that healthy though? Is that healthy in that environment?
absolutely not, in
Yeah.
my personal opinion. It is egregious. Um, I have delivered people, come out in the name of Jesus, release this person in Jesus' name. I plead the blood of Jesus Christ over you. And they have been delivered, and you can see it in their eyes, in their face, and and they're usually very thirsty. And I've done deliverance ministry. It is real. It is an awesome thing. It can help people get delivered by demonic possession. But what they were trying to do was take my mental health issues, which everything to them was demonic. Everything was demonic.
Mm,
Okay. So if you slap a tag on everything as
mm,
being demonic, then you're going to treat it like an exorcism. Does that
absolutely.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
does that make sense?
Mm,
Because they would
mm.
have a mob mentality. They had his wife had oh, this is really bad. I don't even know if I can go there, but she had a group of women that followed her, and they actually had swords that they carried, and they believed that they were part of her group, and they named themselves after her. And I'm not going to say her name because some people listening may know who this is, but they would name themselves after her, and they were her prayer group, and they would actually do spiritual dances with the swords, chanting, speaking in tongues. Now, this was really, I'm telling you, we were in a cult. This is very different than other experiences that I've had. But when I say that it was disruptive to my mental health, that's putting it very mildly. So I would go on and off my medication. I would stop seeing my therapist. I would stop going to the psychiatrist. I would just be like, God, I have to believe you that you're going to heal me of this, deliver me of this. Now, I have seen God deliver people of things. Not everybody gets healed. Not everybody gets delivered. Sometimes, the scripture says, yea, though I walk through the valley of death. It doesn't say I sit down in the valley of death. It says, yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Yeah, exactly.
God will walk through it with you. It took me years to.
I think, on that, and I agree with you on that. And it's such a beautiful knowing to know that. And it's also important for people to know, I think, that God will guide you to where you need to be. So just because your mom had a different experience with her BPD doesn't mean you have to have the same, right?
Right.
So
and BPD means borderline personality disorder.
Yes. I just want to stop for an ad break, Alice. So okay. we will be back in a second. So we will just be doing our ad.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Ingrid Dinter. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in 2004, and then I was re-diagnosed with a recurrence in 2014. But I've also been a Spooky 2 user since 2017. After a year, I had a CT scan that had shown that things had shrunk, which is really cool. And then eventually, you kind of get to the level where tumor markers are stable. So I'm very, very grateful for this. I am certainly using my Spooky 2 every single day. So thank you to Spooky 2. I don't think I'd be where I am today without it.
Each of us is a quantum in the vast world. No matter where you are in the world, when you need help, we will extend our hands, delivering positive love and energy.
I am Devitt. I'm 85 years old, living in Pretoria in South Africa. I was introduced to Spooky 2 about 5 years ago by a friend because my sister was dying from Candida. Doctors and specialists says that she was incurable. She was healed by the Spooky 2 within 3 months, completely healed. I've got, after that I bought Generator X's, I've got 2. And I've got these 4 blue ones. I've got a scaler and a harmony, ray gun, cold laser, about everything that you know, because it's amazing, and thanks for that you are healing the world. Thank you.
The world is bound together with love. Spooky will continue to spread love wherever we go.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I just, these stories are amazing. It really is. And I must say, I really, each one to what they enjoy, but I'm just enjoying that we have so many natural options coming our way. As much as what we've got to obviously be discerning with a lot of stuff, it's like allopathic medicine has absolutely had the floor for a long time, right? Big pharma,
Absolutely.
and still do. But it's good to see that more and more of this type of stuff is actually coming to the fore, and people are realizing, you know, the power of
I noticed,
natural.
Shanti, one person in the chat had asked about DID and satanic cult ritual abuse and how that coincides with this, I guess, is what their question is. It's is it Karen Howig?
Yeah.
Basically, there is satanic, somebody can have demon possession. That is when the demon is literally inside of you. And these people that do these, what Jesse Zaboter talks about with the demonic sacrifice and all the stuff they do with the kids and all of that, is definitely satanic ritual abuse. Now that's different. That is demonic possession. There is also what's called demonic oppression. And that means that you think of having a demon on your shoulder, like oppressing you.
So like an attachment,
Yes, like an attachment, exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do experience that, and we call it opening doors. For instance, if you're playing with the Ouija board or you're doing something in the satanic realm, my father used to delve into that a lot. He was into necromancy, talking to the dead and all kinds of stuff. And so there were a lot of demons in our household growing up. There was a lot of demonic oppression in our home. And you can feel it. Have you ever walked into a room and you just get the goosebumps? You can feel the evil in the room. Do you know what I speak of? And
yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad you made that distinction, you know, because I think that's important, because I think possession, you know, when we're talking about SRA and stuff, that has got to be given. They've got to consent to possession, right? To use their body.
Right.
Or, I mean, I also have to, and then let's say when we have the oppression, what you're talking about, the attachments,
right,
that also comes from a lot of, as you say, trauma, stress, abuse, all sorts of things like that, right? And especially from when it's a child. So these things then get attracted to you, and they'll, like a magnet, and they kind of sit on you, they suck on you, they leech off you, right? So, but that's not the same as the possession, because the possession controls you. This one will control you, but on a different level, if you allow it, right?
Right. If you hear Jesse talk about the breakdown of the army of Satan, which a lot of people are like, why do you care to get involved in knowledge about demonic things? Because there's good and there's evil. And for instance, there's a spirit of incest, and that can run through a family lineage, just as it did mine, until I stood in the gap and said, no more incest, no more, come off of my family. And there's all types of, there's alcoholism, drug abuse, all kinds, the spirit of pharmakeia, that is. Jesse talks about these different spirits, and demonic spirits is what they are. So there is a need. There is a need for deliverance. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm saying that some churches can take it too far and make it a show, and make it, like I experienced, abusive, and you get shunned a lot because, it's like, oh, there's the girl with the mental illness. It's not like, and I wasn't the only one in church going through this. There were many with mental health issues that went through the same exact thing. And, my brother and I were talking about it the other day, and he went to church with us also. And he said he witnessed it happening to another woman friend of ours, and it was not pretty. It's a horrible thing to watch, and it's wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong when it's happening. So that's one of the things. The second thing is that they have no education. Everything to them is either bipolar, everything is bipolar, or everything is depression. Everybody just assumes that's what they know. And they assume that you're going to go absolutely crazy, wacky on them, and God only knows what you're going to do. Start throwing ashtrays at people. I don't know what you're going to start doing. I had a bipolar boss that was an attorney once, and he did start throwing ashtrays at me. These things happen when you're in the middle of a meltdown, and the education part comes in where you learn how to deal with it. Is it demonic activity, or is it a mental health breakdown? Is somebody having a panic attack? Is somebody having an anxiety attack? Is somebody having a bipolar manic attack? There are so many different things that can be happening, Chantelle, that they have no education. And it's not that they have to go through psychiatric school or whatever to get that kind of education. It's out there. They just choose not to know about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But don't you think it's part of their conditioning, though? Because if you look at a lot of the churches, and we know, I mean, look what happens in the churches so much of the time. And it's like in the Mormon church, you're going to have, for example, what we've heard on previous interviews, you're going to be having background, deep, dark activities going on while there's the front, the cover life, right? So you have the light side, so to speak, of the church, right? Of the Mormon church particularly, all the churches, Catholic Church, same thing.
Exactly.
So I'm not necessarily saying that they are going to the extremes that we've heard in Jesse's testimonies, But what I am saying is, don't you think that the church is conditioned to control people? Because I always say, when we talk about Satan infiltrating the church, whatever it is, I'll go, no, the church is the infiltrator. And not all churches, make no mistake, because they've used the church to infiltrate people.
You mean with the cover life?
Yes, and the really the indoctrination that mental health is something to be ashamed of.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. The way I see it, the churches are on so many levels, whether it's full-scale abuse happening underneath the floorboards of with some sacrifice going on, or whether it's done subtly via the congregation and with the preaching, the minister or preacher, whatever, preaching a certain word. And I'm not saying they all do that. Of course, there are many good ones, but I think there are a lot that are indoctrinated and absolutely also control themselves to do these things.
It can get so convoluted, and the more I research, the more I learn. We went to 2 more churches after that, which were a bit more healthy, but there's still the cover life. There's still stuff going on in the background. There's still the incest going on. There's still, and I'm not saying, I don't want people to get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm, a homosexual hater or anything like that. But when you're in the pulpit and you're preaching and teaching against homosexuality, and you are a homosexual, there's a little bit of hypocrisy, shall we say? You
Yeah,
know, do you know what I'm saying? And
absolutely.
they're so dead set against it. And there's the cover lives are amazing, amazing. There's a language, there's a lingo, you know, my sister, my brother, praise the Lord, how are you? You know, it's all, the cover life is so entrenched, you
So
know.
you mean even the way they greet each other like that is part of the talk, part of their lingo. So just by the way they greet each other, hello, my sister of whatever,
Mhm.
Hail Mary, I don't know, whatever it is.
It's I'm not I'm telling you, we were in a cult. It was really intense. And so yeah, everyone was sister, everyone was brother. We were all one big family. What happened was my husband started to notice some funky stuff going on with the finances of the church. And so he started to compile. My husband is a computer software developer and he has that logical analytical mind. And so he started to comprise a whole folder of information. And we started doing some investigation into the incest victims in the church and into the people that were homosexuals, lesbians. There were a whole bunch that were just off, and yet they were acting as though they were perfection. Okay. So we get this whole file together, and there's a hierarchy, and we went to the upper presbytery of the church. And we sat down with him, and our file was like 2 inches thick. And we're just like, this is what's going on. We had rap sheets on people, we had money information, we had all kinds of documentation of this stuff going on. And the pastor that we saw was just sitting there crying his eyes out. He was bawling. And he's just like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe my coworker is doing this. I can't believe this is going on in the church. Well, he went to see the guy above him. And long story short, our pastor beat him to it. When the presbyter arrived, the door was locked and he could not access to get in. And what the pastor did was he invested a large sum of money into the missions field. And because he did that and invested that money into the missions field, they dropped all the charges against him. And they
Wow.
took the file and threw it in the garbage.
That's insane. Wow. Oops. Not my laptop. Wow.
So all that we had gone through, and then what they did was they called my husband and I in and sat us down before the board of trustees and deacons. And they said that my husband was not the head of his household, that I had taken over. I was the spirit of Jezebel. And that I had taken over our home, and that my husband was weak and he was not able to control me. And so therefore, and also because I was working outside of the home and I was doing things that a wife shouldn't do. I should be staying home. I should be raising my child. I shouldn't have a nanny or anybody to help me. I shouldn't be working outside of the house. And they went through this whole thing. And then they started saying that he couldn't control my mental illness. He couldn't control this, that. And they right then and there, for literal words, defrocked us of all of our titles and positions in the church. They took us out of deaconship. They took him out of trusteeship. They took me off of altar working. They took us out of everything, even door greeters. We weren't allowed to do anything in the church. And then they said that we should leave the church. And they basically, for all intents and purposes, excommunicated us. Now, this was done in an afternoon. And then they started spreading rumors the next day that my husband was a pedophile, that he was molesting Nikki's friends when they were sleeping over.
Okay, who started the rumor? Was this people in the church?
Yes.
Gossipers?
Yes.
Because no one really knew what was going on, right?
Exactly.
I guess.
Yes.
So they create these stories.
Yes.
Wow. And this is the church.
And
this is the place where you're supposed to lay your problems and your worries and feel safe.
Right. So we literally were excommunicated. And I kept saying to people, if I met them in the shopping center or I, saw them out and about, I'd say, we never left Christ. We just left the church.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Isn't it insane when you actually look back and we're in a place now where we're talking about these things and we are actually able to, shed some light on these topics. But when we look back, it's clear there's been so much damage done. And wow, when we take the veils or the layers off our eyes, right, it's suddenly so clear what's been happening for years and years and years, and how they've used the church to indoctrinate people.
Exactly.
To tell you that you contain the spirit of Jezebel and that your husband, no, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to go there. That is just horrific. How did you guys deal with that?
Deep depression, a lot of crying, a lot of loneliness. We were cut off from all the friends that we knew, all the fellowship that we knew. That was our life. The church was our life, literally. And our daughter at the time was 16, and we didn't want to pull her out of the church because as an only child, that was all she knew. And they had a different department that was the youth department. And so we said, you know what, Nikki, when you feel God is telling you to leave the church, then you leave. We didn't force her out. So she basically stayed with the church. But what happened was, this was so bad. We came home one day and she was curled up in a fetal position on her bed, crying hysterically. And we're like, what is going on? And she said, I'm going to hell. Pastor said, I'm going to hell. This is terrible. I know I'm never going to live this down. God will never forgive me. We're like, what happened? And it turns out that pastor said that if you kiss your boyfriend, it's just as if you had sex with him, and that you were no longer a virgin, and that you were going to hell. And so she was convinced, because she had kissed her little boyfriend back then, that she was no longer a virgin, that she could get AIDS, everything. I mean, this is insane what was put into her head. And that she was going to hell. And we finally said, okay, that's it. Are you ready to leave now? So then she was ready to leave, because we had to tell her, no, that is not the case. It's not like as if you had sex. You kissed a boy, that's it. We had to walk her through this whole thing and get her decompressed from it. She was so wrapped up in it.
Such intimidation, right? And you see, that is such gaslighting, yeah. Right? Because it's obviously some perverted pastor who gets his rocks off on thinking about that. And it's amazing how many pastors are interested in people's sex lives, isn't it?
I was going to tell you, at one session we went to, my husband and I, because you had to go in and share with your pastor how, if you were in ministry, how your sex life was. And he would literally, and forgive me, and get the kids out of the room and just, forgive me, I'm not trying to be gross or anything, but he would ask me, he would say, do you get wet down there when your husband approaches you? Does he still get hard for you? He would ask these questions. When he penetrates you, do you have an orgasm? He would ask us these questions during a counseling session. I'm not making this up. This is God's truth. And we would have to sit there and answer these questions.
I have no words for that. I'm actually quite dumbstruck because, I mean, I can understand that certain topics need to be addressed, but there's surely some type of boundary.
I felt like he was getting into it. I mean, it
Yeah,
was
exactly.
like,
that's what I'm saying. It's
that
like
it was so embarrassing and humiliating. And then you have to see him in the hallway and see him in the pulpit and sit there just feeling so uncomfortable and so exposed and so violated. It's violating. We went through that. We literally went through that on a regular basis.
At what point did you stop that? The counseling with a
It didn't
with a
stop
pervy
until we were
pastor?
kicked out of the church.
Okay, so that it all came to an end at the same time. The pervy pastor. Pastor pervy.
The pervy pastor. That's a good one. I mean, and I'm sharing this story, and there are people that know me that might listen to this that still go there, or that, you know, I was friends with there, that could listen to this and want to really just rip me to shreds right now, literally, because I'm letting these things out. I'm telling these things. It's like,
it's so important, you know, Alice. Honestly, as channel hosts, you can see I'm giggling. I actually don't have words for that. You kind of have to grow the skin of 27 rhinos, you know, and eventually, you know, it's just because I like, really, did you actually say that? I can't actually believe people say certain things, but it certainly doesn't have the same effect on me anymore as what it had in the beginning. That's for sure. Because you're telling your story, this is your testimony, and you are exposing things that people need to hear about. So
and if they're going through it, I want other people to know, get out.
Absolutely.
Just get out. You know, it's like we sat under it for 10 years of our lives.
Absolutely. My gosh.
Now, in the church we went to after that, I was able to start a group. This is positive, where I worked with one of the pastors, and I worked with a gentleman from NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And we started an emotional well-being group that grew to over 30 people that were coming on a weekly basis on Monday nights. And we were talking about mental health issues. We were talking about family issues. It was extremely healthy. And NAMI worked in conjunction with us. And if somebody was having deeper issues, we would send them into counseling. We would send them in for work. You know, they had free classes through NAMI for the family. They had classes for the person who was going through the mental illness. So it was extremely healthy. It was very rewarding. We did this for 5 years. It was exceptional. I feel that is a model that churches should have, that they should put into effect.
Absolutely. You know, and I really think that would, stuff like that, honestly, I think shouldn't, because churches have such a strong control over people, you know, and this is not, I mean, you're not the first person that's telling me stuff like this as well. I mean, I know, you know, when we've had previous interviews also with Jesse and various other people that have come out of the church, there's a lot of craziness that actually goes on in there, and the women and how they intimidate other, like, I remember there was this one story, she was talking about this young girl who was going to one of the priest's wives or preacher's wives for assistance. And then this wife tells her what a little tart she is and how badly she's dressing, and you know what I'm saying? So it's that kind of stuff. So I always say women are better at stuff like that. But when you've got a woman in her negative polarity who's threatened and indoctrinated, that's not good either. And sadly, you find a lot of that in the church. But I love that what you were saying there about your emotional well-being groups, you know, where that really, I agree. There are many things that are successful and can be. But honestly, this whole organized religion, for me, is a big red flag. It really, really, really is. There's a big difference between being a believer and being a true Christian than organized religion. To me, that's a big, big red flag.
We had to go through deprogramming. My husband and I and daughter literally had to go through deprogramming after we came out of that church. Because
when you say you had to go through deprogramming, are you talking about actually going professionally?
Professionally.
Or were you just...
Yes. Wow. We paid to go through deprogramming because we had to be unprogrammed from all the brainwashing that we had over those 10 years.
Wow. That is so sad. And imagine how many people, Alice, haven't had that.
Right.
They're still sitting in that program space. That's exactly my point. And this is why the church is so dangerous. Because to have fellowship with a group of women or men or whatever it is, families, is a very different thing. You don't have to go and commune in the church and listen to a preacher thinking that he's God because his ego ran away with him.
You just have to know the difference, which we didn't at the time, but we do now, between a healthy church and an unhealthy church.
Exactly. But how many people actually have, because when we look at what's happening in the churches, hey, I can tell you what's happening in the Afrikaans churches in this country. It was flip. And remember, we're talking strong Dutch, strong German conditioning. So I mean, when we hear about, and I always keep saying, the South Africans are very shy to talk at this stage about this sort of thing, but I'm confident they'll start stepping forward. But you hear horror stories about SRA happening in the Dutch Reformed Church, particularly, and our politicians involved, and anyway.
I don't know how I don't know how you fix it. I don't know how you fix it. Our son-in-law is a minister. He is exceptional, not just because he's our son-in-law, but I've seen his walk with Christ. Nikki, Nikki, you've met her on this station. She's exceptional. Her heart is pure. His heart is pure.
Absolutely, and she's so wise. I've never met him, but I mean, Nikki is such a beautiful, wise young woman. She's walked a beautiful path, and she's a strong young lady. And I, for one, can certainly see that they are so the real deal. But I'm sure that there are definitely the dodgy ones that emulate that. They can, we know that the satanic cult emulates everything. So they are like the psychopath. The psychopath will emulate emotions completely, right? So they can emulate those characteristics as well. And I think that's where the danger lies, because you look at these charismatic pastors in these churches that do all these things. I mean, there have been many survivors speaking about how they literally go in on a Saturday night, for example. Let's say the service is a Sunday morning, and they do all these rituals and call up all these dodgy things. I mean, I heard a story from an African woman who was one of the top witch. She was the top witch in East Africa,
Uh-huh.
I think. Very, very, I mean, her story is absolutely fascinating. And she'll talk about from a very young age, she was already doing this stuff. And then she talks about how just before she would go to church, she would literally leave her demons in the bathroom at home. She would take the ones to church that could cope with her sitting there, because they were asking, what about all this stuff? And then what she would do is she would then, the demons that were being casted out in these exorcisms, she would draw them in and send them back into different people.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I mean, the level of deception and, the level of sorcery that exists, gosh.
That is very, very doable. That is very doable. I want to leave with some thoughts. If you want to know if you're in an unhealthy church, is the pastor exalted above God? If you ever hear from the pulpit, check with your pastor, run it by your pastor, make sure your pastor agrees with this, okay? If there's gossip going on behind people's backs in church, rampant gossip, because you're supposed to scripturally go to your brother or sister and talk to them about the situation first before you start gossiping about them, okay? If there's a lot of stuff done in the upper echelon of the church behind closed doors, if it's not an open door policy, if you hear rumors of incest or things going on at summer camps, at outings, at anything that the kids go to, and you hear any kind of incest or any kind of sexual abuse going on, any of these things should be big, huge red flags for you. Big, huge red flags. And we kept shoving it under the carpet, shoving it under the carpet. If you ever see or go or experience an exorcism like I did, anything like that is a big red flag. Get out and find another congregation, something. That's all I can say from my personal experience of many years.
Alice, I think your show today was really, it hits it out of the park for me, because I think these are such invaluable topics. And my granddaughter is in the chat. Hello,
Oh, no, how old is she?
she just came in.
Oh, she just came in. Okay.
Yeah. So so what I'm saying is that I think these are topics that are so valuable for us to have, right? To have conversations about. And I think you're doing a wonderful job of educating. I was just trying to think of your slogan again. What was that?
Empathize, educate, advocate.
Okay. Empathize, educate, advocate. And you're doing everything. So I think it's really amazing
that
you're able to do that. So I want to say thank you so much, Alice, for coming in and joining me again today. We will see you in 2 weeks' time, same time. Okay. And not sure what topic we'll be doing, but one of the topics we're looking at, definitely very interesting, is looking at shock therapy. And in fact, I think it was Liz Dennett. Liz was saying earlier in the chat that they're still doing it. She was saying that a friend of hers...
They still are doing it.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
They wanted me to go through it.
Wow. Well, thank God you didn't.
No, thank God I didn't. Yeah. So, no, I would love to talk about some of the practices they did back in the 60s and 70s and what that was like and such like that. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to. I would love to do that as well, because that was really such a crazy psychological time. And if you think about in the time as well, in the 60s, they discovered LSD.
Exactly.
And that was what not Mengele, what was his name again? The one who, the CIA guy,
Mengele?
not Mengele, the one that started creating LSD. So, yeah.
I
I
don't
can't remember his
remember.
name offhand now. I can't
Mhm.
remember his name offhand. But anyway, look forward to catching up with you guys later, where we're going to be talking about this more. So thank you so much, Alice, for joining
And
me.
Chantelle, without your allowing me to be on this platform, I wouldn't be able to get the message out. So I thank you.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, that's the this is the platform for the brave-hearted. So thank you for being a braveheart. You wouldn't have found it if you weren't.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
indeed. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. And take it easy. And we will see you. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Wednesday. Yes, I'll see you with Bryce tomorrow. Cheers,
Okay. God bless
guys.
everyone.
Bye.